I want you to imagine, just for a second, being so universally hilarious that Charlie Chaplin-like, the undisputed king of comedy himself, personally calls you the best comedian alive.
Right, which is just massive praise.
Oh, totally. And you don't just achieve fame, you become the highest paid actor in the entire world.
Yeah.
Your face is so culturally significant that it actually gets painted into a national mural by the legendary artist Diego Rivera. You are just an absolute titan.
The biggest of the big.
Exactly. Yet, despite all of this, you had to invent a completely meaningless fake name just to hide your career from your own parents.
Because they thought it was shameful.
Right. They thought your job was completely shameful.
It is just an unbelievable paradox. I mean, the man who became the literal face of an entire nation started out terrified that his family would find out what he actually did for a living.
Welcome to this deep dive for People Pod. Today, we are going on a biographical exploration of Mario Moreno Reyes.
But, the world knows him simply as Cantinflas.
Cantinflas. We are going to trace his evolution from the sprawling slums of Mexico City to the absolute glitz of Hollywood.
And we'll explore how he weaponized the Spanish language, fought corrupt political systems, and really became this ultimate symbol for the working class.
Because this is fundamentally a story about power, right?
Oh, 100%.
Oh, girl.
We are looking at how a marginalized kid took the very tools used to oppress his people and turned them into cultural and, political gold.
Let's unpack this with an analogy right out of the gate for you guys listening. Think of Cantinflas like a modern viral satirist.
Okay, I like that.
You know the ones, right? The people online who use that confusing, empty corporate jargon to make fun of out-of-touch CEOs.
Oh, sure, like the fake LinkedIn influencers.
Exactly, except Cantinflas did this on a massive national scale back in the 1940s, and he was so effective at it that he actually changed the dictionary.
He literally rewired the language used by the system. But to understand how he did that, we really have to look at the environment that shaped him. We have to start in the streets.
Right. So born in 1911, he's one of 8 kids.
Yeah, huge family.
And his dad is an impoverished mail carrier. They live in Tepito, which is a notoriously tough, harsh neighborhood in Mexico City.
Well, and the interesting thing is his mother actually came from an affluent family.
Oh, wait, really?
Yeah, but she was completely disinherited when she married his father. So Mario grows up with this intense awareness of the class divide.
Wow, that adds a whole different layer to it.
It really does. He sees wealth, but he lives in poverty. So he has to survive using, quick wit and street smarts.
And he explores a few different paths early on, doesn't he?
He does. He tries his hand at medicine. He even steps into the professional boxing ring for a bit.
Boxing? That's quite a leap.
I know, right? But eventually, his natural comic personality leads him to join these traveling tent shows in the 1930s. They were known as the Carpas.
The Carpas. Okay. What were those like?
They were crucial to his development. Like, if you were a performer in these tents, you weren't playing to some polite, seated theater crowd.
Right. No velvet seats.
Exactly. You were playing to rowdy, working-class audiences who would absolutely boo you right off the stage if you didn't hold their attention.
So is brutal.
The ultimate training ground. It forced him to be adaptable. He danced, he did acrobatics, he plays roles across all these different professions. He essentially learned how to read a room and react in real time.
Now, when he first started trying to formulate a comic identity in these tents, he actually tried imitating Al Jolson's use of blackface.
Yeah.
Blackface. How does a Mexican comedian in the 1930s land on imitating Al Jolson?
I know, it sounds incredibly jarring to us today. But at the time, you have to remember, he was a young performer searching for a recognizable archetype of the outsider.
Right.
And American cinema was highly influential down there, and Jolson was just a massive star. But Moreno quickly realized that putting on someone else's culture was a dead end.
It didn't resonate.
No, not at all. He realized he didn't need an imported archetype of marginalization. He had a goldmine of authentic material right in front of his own eyes in Mexico City.
So he strips away the imitation and creates something deeply authentic to his own experience, which is the peludito.
The impoverished slum dweller.
Right. And the visual of this peludito was instantly recognizable to anyone living in those neighborhoods, wasn't it?
Oh, immediately.
Oh.
He wore these baggy pants that hung precariously low, held up by literally nothing but a rope for a belt.
A rope?
Yeah. He had a torn shirt, this makeshift hat, and a highly distinctive, very sparse little mustache at the corners of his mouth.
His corner.
Right. He was basically the embodiment of the marginalized Mexican everyman.
So he adopts this persona. He's making a name for himself in the corpus, but there is still the issue of his parents.
The parents who hate the entertainment business.
Exactly. They view it as a completely shameful occupation. So he makes up a nonsense word to hide his identity. Cantinflas.
Which means absolute nothing.
Nothing at all. It's just a shield. But I have to ask, if he eventually becomes the biggest star in the country, how long could he possibly hide this from his parents?
Well, the irony there is staggering. I mean, he adopts a fake name for absolute anonymity, right? Just to stay completely off his parents' radar.
Right.
But that very same meaningless name becomes the most famous word in the entire country.
You can't hide from that.
No, you really can't. By the time he's a national sensation, the secret was obviously out. His parents knew.
I bet that was an awkward dinner conversation.
Probably. But by then, the name Cantinflas had taken on a life of its own. It stopped being a disguise and, started being a cultural institution.
Now, what truly transformed him from a funny guy in a tent to that cultural icon wasn't just the baggy pants or the physical comedy.
No, not at all.
It was his mouth.
His real weapon was his linguistic superpower. Like, the character of the Peludito was visually striking, but his absolute genius was the art of talking in circles.
Right. He would strike up a completely normal conversation with someone, like a cop or a wealthy landlord or even an attractive woman, and he would just start complicating it.
Just layering it on.
Piling on words, twisting the syntax, throwing in these bizarre vocabulary choices, until literally no one understood anything that was being said. But what did that actually sound like in practice?
Okay, think about the last time you read a legally binding contract.
Ugh, painful.
Right. Or listen to a politician desperately dodging a question. It sounded a bit like this. Well, officer, it's not that I'm opposed to the fundamental concept of the law, because as we all know, humanity is humanity, and therefore, considering the macroscopic implications of my presence here on this sidewalk.
Which intrinsically relates to the existential crisis of the aforementioned pavement.
Exactly. He would just keep going and finish with something like, you understand, yes.
He drowns them in confident nonsense. It's like a magician's sleight of hand.
That's a great way to put it.
The waving hand is the chaotic grammar and the big vocabulary words, and the trick is him slipping out the back door while the authority figure is trying to untangle the sentence.
And he delivered it with such absolute conviction that the authority figure would just nod along.
Because they don't want to look stupid.
Precisely. They are completely humiliated, but unable to admit they had no idea what was happening. And he specifically used this tactic when he owed someone money, when he was flirting, or when he was trying to outsmart the police.
Now, to understand why this resonated so massively, we have to look at the historical context for you guys. Because in 1930s Mexico, the illiteracy rate was a staggering 70%.
Yeah, 7-0. Language, specifically formal, educated, bureaucratic language, was quite literally a tool of exclusion.
It was a weapon.
It really was. It was how the wealthy and the powerful kept the lower classes in their place. Like, if you couldn't read the contract, you couldn't fight the landlord.
Right, and if you couldn't speak the formal dialect, you couldn't defend yourself to the police.
Exactly. As the cultural critic Carlos Monsiváis pointed out, Cantinflas represented the illiterate underdog taking control of the language by whatever means he could.
He basically leveled the playing field.
He did.
He used empty confusion to puncture the pretensions of the elite, making the educated authorities look like absolute fools.
And this style of talking became so culturally dominant, so embedded in the fabric of the Spanish language, that the Real Academia Española actually added his words to the dictionary.
Wait, the official royal institution overseeing the Spanish language?
Yes. In 1992, they officially recognized the verb cantinflear.
Which means to talk in circles.
Right. Along with the nouns cantinflas and cantinflada.
That is wild. And that linguistic mastery naturally translated to massive box office success. In 1940, he stars in a film called Ahí está el detalle,
which translates to There Lies the Detail.
And he just becomes a superstar across Latin America.
He really does. And his character began to evolve as well. In 1941, he starred in The Unknown Policeman as Agent 777.
So he goes from being the marginalized peasant to an empowered public servant.
Yeah, he demonstrated that the Peludito could flow into different social roles. He could be a cop, a fireman, a congressman.
Kind of like an everyman.
Very much so. He was actually honored by police forces across Latin America because he brought humanity and humor to law enforcement.
Wow.
And the box office numbers were unprecedented. His 1941 bullfighting parody, Neither Blood Nor Sand, it just broke records for Mexican-made films Everywhere Spanish was spoken.
So he becomes this titan at home, and then inevitably Hollywood comes calling.
Right.
In 1956, he makes his American debut in Around the World in 80 Days. He plays Passepartout alongside David Niven.
And the film was a massive hit. It made an unadjusted $42 million at the box office.
Which, adjusted for inflation, is well over $500 million today.
It's just incredible. He actually wins a Golden Globe for Best Actor in a Musical or Comedy for that role.
And Variety magazine is praising his Chaplin-esque quality. He becomes the highest paid actor in the world.
But then comes his second Hollywood feature.
Right. Released in 1960, it was called Pepe.
Yeah. Columbia Pictures basically threw everything they had at it to replicate that earlier success.
They packed it with the biggest cameos imaginable, didn't they?
Oh, huge names. Frank Sinatra, Judy Garland, Maurice Chevalier, Debbie Reynolds.
And it completely flopped.
Completely. The American audiences just didn't get it.
Which really makes me wonder, is it ever truly possible for a comedian whose entire identity is tied to the nuances of their native tongue to achieve global crossover? Or was the failure of Pepe just completely inevitable?
I think it really highlights the absolute ceiling of translation. You know, Cantinflas' humor wasn't just about slipping on a banana peel or making a funny face.
Right.
It was intricately rooted in the syntax and rhythm of Mexican Spanish. When you try to translate a concept like cantinflear into English, you just get a guy saying confusing things.
It just sounds weird.
Exactly. You lose the cultural rebellion. You lose the entire satire of the Mexican class system.
The subversion entirely gets lost in translation.
Even Cantinflas himself, in a 1992 interview, admitted that the language barrier was the absolute biggest impediment to making it big in the States.
So he hits this linguistic wall in Hollywood. But back home in the Americas, his influence transcended the silver screen entirely. He wasn't just an actor anymore.
No, he had become a legitimate power broker. Cantinflas became a fierce labor activist. He actually used his massive fame and leverage to fight something called charismo.
Okay, for those less listening who aren't familiar with mid-century Mexican politics, what exactly is charismo?
Right, so it was a practice by the ruling political party in Mexico, the PRI, where they would co-opt and control trade unions. They would install these puppet leaders to keep the working class obedient and basically prevent actual strikes from happening.
Wow.
And Cantinflas didn't just speak out against this. He actively organized against it. He serves as the president of the National Actors Guild and the first Secretary General of the Independent Film Workers Union.
But how did an actor manage to take on a ruling political party and actually win?
Well, he used his untouchability. He was so universally beloved by millions of people that the government couldn't simply silence him or make him disappear like they might with a regular union organizer.
He was too famous.
Way too famous. He leveraged his celebrity status to negotiate independent contracts and protect workers. He was essentially daring the establishment to go to war with their biggest cultural export.
That is so bold.
It really is. He gave the working class struggle a famous face and undeniable authenticity.
I mean, the duality between his goofy, baggy pants on-screen persona and his real-world political power is just fascinating. It's as if a slapstick comedian suddenly became the head of a massive labor union and successfully took on the government.
And his influence bled into the art world, too, often courting some really intense controversy.
Hey, really?
Yeah, in 1953, he did a theater run called Yo Colón, playing Christopher Columbus, making comedic observations about modern Mexico. And this coincided with the massive cultural flashpoint involving Diego Rivera, the legendary muralist.
Because Rivera painted a mural on the very theater where Cantinflas was performing, right?
Exactly. And the mural depicted Cantinflas right alongside the Virgin of Guadalupe.
Oh, wow. I can imagine how that went over.
The reaction from conservatives and the Archbishop was swift and severe. They called it totally blasphemous.
I mean, to place a comic character, specifically one who represented the impoverished slums, next to the most sacred religious icon in Mexico.
Right. It was seen as highly offensive to the establishment. They felt Rivera was equating a slum dweller with divinity. And the pressure was so intense that they actually forced the image of the Virgin to be painted out of the mural entirely.
That is intense. And his reach extended into the United States as well, right?
Absolutely.
In 1961, Cantinflas is suddenly campaigning at supermarkets in San Antonio, Texas, right alongside U.S. Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson.
Yeah, they were campaigning to help elect Henry B. Gonzalez. And the strategy worked. Gonzalez became the first Hispanic elected to the Texas State Senate and as a U.S. congressman from Texas.
That's a huge milestone.
It is. Cantinflas' appeal among the Mexican-American community was so deeply rooted that even the U.S. vice president knew he needed his star power to secure those votes.
But, when a figure this monumental dies, the aftermath is rarely quiet.
Sadly, yes. Cantinflas was a lifelong smoker, and he died of lung cancer on April 20, 1993. He was 81.
And the response was overwhelming.
Massive.
It was a 3-day national event. Thousands and thousands of people stood out in the pouring rain for his funeral. Even the United States Senate held a moment of silence for him.
By the end of his life, he had basically become a folk hero. He did huge amounts of Catholic charity work, he funded orphanages, and he even made educational cartoons.
Wait, cartoons?
Yeah. In the 70s and 80s, he produced The Cantinflas Show.
Oh, I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, it was an animated version of him meeting historical figures like Einstein or Shakespeare, teaching kids about science and history. He devoted so much of his retirement to education and charity.
But the man who made a career out of confusing authorities left behind a legacy that thoroughly confused the courts.
Oh, the legal mess following his death was incredibly complex. A brutal 20-year legal war erupted over his estate and the rights to his films.
20 years.
Yes, it became a messy three-way battle because of the intersection of international copyright and Mexican inheritance law.
Right, because you had his adopted son, Mario Moreno Ivanova, fighting against Cantinflas' blood nephew, Eduardo Moreno Laperi.
Exactly.
And then Columbia Pictures in the mix, too, claiming they had bought the rights to 34 films decades earlier.
And the legal loopholes were just a nightmare to untangle. The nephew claimed Cantinflas gave him a specific written notice on his deathbed, granting him the rights to the films.
Okay.
But the son argued that as the direct legal heir, standard inheritance rights meant everything belonged to him. The son also framed it as a nationalistic issue.
Like keeping it in the country.
Right, keeping a national treasure within Mexico, rather than letting an American studio own it. Meanwhile, the court noted several major discrepancies in Colombia's older paperwork regarding their copyright claims.
It took 2 decades and multiple appeals all the way up to the Supreme Court to sort it out.
It did.
In 2001, Colombia retained ownership of the 34 disputed films. And it wasn't until 2014 that the Mexican Supreme Court finally awarded 39 films and the rights to his name to his nephew.
Just a marathon of litigation.
There is a tragic irony here, though. You have a comedian whose entire genius was based on outsmarting systems, avoiding debt, and confusing people in power with complicated words.
Yeah.
And he ends up leaving behind a legal and financial puzzle that took the Supreme Court 20 years to decipher.
The master of obfuscation left a perfectly obfuscated estate.
Exactly.
But if we look past the legal battles and really synthesize his ultimate cultural footprint, Cantinflas was far more than an entertainer.
Oh, without a doubt.
The scholar Jeffrey M. Pilcher actually describes his legacy as a metaphor for the chaos of Mexican modernity. Pilcher called him the palpitating moment of everything that wants to be that which it cannot be.
Wait, what does that actually mean in plain English?
Well, it means Cantinflas represented a Mexico that was trying to project itself as a wealthy, highly structured, modern superpower, while it was still struggling with deep systemic poverty.
So there was this massive disconnect.
Right. The government and the elite wanted to present a clean, organized society. Cantinflas, in his torn shirt and baggy pants, speaking this beautiful gibberish, was the reality, checking that ambition.
Wow.
He symbolized the underdog triumphing through trickery. He proved that sometimes the absolute best way to fight an oppressive, highly structured society is to reflect its absurdity right back at it. He crumbled social hierarchies just by speaking out of turn and refusing to make sense on their terms.
It really leaves you with this final thought for you listening. In today's world of hyper-polished, PR-trained politicians, billionaires who speak entirely in sanitized press releases, and algorithmic corporate speak,
Yeah.
who is our modern Cantinflas? Who out there is using weaponized nonsense to expose the absurdities of the modern elite?
That's a great question.
Look for the peladitos in our own culture. Look for the ones hiding plain truth behind a wall of beautiful, chaotic gibberish. Because as we've learned today, sometimes the only way to be truly heard
Is to make sure the authorities have no idea what you're actually saying.
a powerful legacy to leave behind. Just don't forget to use a fake name so your family doesn't find out.